Hello everyone, I'm Gregg Jarrett here at the live signing for my new book that just came out today, The Russia Hoax, the illicit scheme to clear Hillary Clinton and frame Donald Trump by me, Gregg Jarrett. It is already, by the way, #1 on Amazon, so we're very pleased about that. And in fact, President Trump about 20 minutes ago tweeted out something very nice about it. So he's encouraging you to read it. I hope you will. And thanks for being with us.
Great. I'm Jordan. I'm with Live Signing. I'm going to be here to have a conversation with Gregg and walk through this time with you as an audience and with Gregg as he signs books here. Gregg just came over from the Hannity show and we it was a great time. I watched the interview here while you were there, and that was exciting for sure. One thing really quick to clarify, the website, so this is how this works, is you can actually go to premiercollectibles.com/Gregg. That's Gregg with 2 G's at the end of it. You'll be able to access this interview live and also submit questions. So throughout this interview, we're going to go through, we're going to be taking your questions. So once you purchase a book for yourself, for a friend, for a family member, you will be able to then submit a question, and we'll try to work our way through the list of questions. How does that sound?
Good, sounds good.
Awesome.
Great, thanks for being here, everybody. Appreciate it. I know it's, for those on the East Coast, a little bit late at night, but maybe you were just watching Hannity. We were discussing some breaking news. We had some other things planned, but there's always breaking news to address.
Absolutely. Well, Gregg, why don't we get started by you talking about, I mean, obviously the timing of this book coming out is, you couldn't have written the script here. I mean, this is unbelievable. Talk to me about what inspired you to write the book in the first place.
Well, I began writing columns initially about how Hillary Clinton was cleared, even though I felt it was obvious that she had broken a lot of felony federal statutes. And Comey's statement on July 5th in front of cameras when he cleared her and said no reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case was absurd on its face. And I have talked to so many former federal prosecutors and current federal prosecutors, many of whom I interviewed and are in the book. I have yet to find a prosecutor who wouldn't relish bringing the case against Hillary Clinton. There was such an abundance of evidence against her. It was, as many of them said, an easy case, a slam dunk for the government. So it made no sense that James Comey decided to clear her. So I wrote columns about that, and then, of course, Comey also launched this dilating investigation of Donald Trump. And I began writing columns about that, saying, wait a minute, where was there evidence of probable cause to even launch the investigation? Where was the intelligence to justify a counterintelligence probe? I couldn't find any. And as I continued to write these columns, publishers came to me and said, we think there's a story here that would be good for a book. And eventually, at the behest of Sean Hannity, I decided to write the book.
And he mentioned even tonight that he's watched you write this book now for some time. How long has it taken you to pull all this together?
All right, so I'm signing some of these books while I answer questions.
Yeah.
I began putting together the research in December of last year, but I actually already had most of it. I'm sort of a guy who never throws anything away, and you should see my office. So what it really required was for me to go through all my files that I keep fastidiously and reorganize them into chapters. So by the end of December, I had that done. I had an outline that I had created, and I sat down in late December and began writing the first chapter. Never written a book before, didn't know what I was doing, but I read a book a week. And so I am fairly well versed in how books are constructed because I read so many of them, both fiction and nonfiction. So I simply followed what I see other authors do. And, you know, you never really start with an introduction or a preface. I just knew that. And because, you know, as you write, you're not quite sure where it all is going to take you as you develop the evidence and analyze everything. So I just started writing, and a friend of mine gave me good advice, because it seemed so intimidating to write a book. And she said, just start writing, and you'll find your way. And she was right.
That's great. Again, for those of you just joining us on the Facebook page, you can purchase a book, a signed book. As you can see, Gregg is here signing. We are featuring the Russia hoax, the illicit scheme to clear Hillary Clinton and frame Donald Trump. You're signing books here tonight, right?
Yes.
I mean, these are the books that will be shipped out. So go to that website. The website is premiercollectibles.com/Gregg, 2 G's, and purchase books. Purchase books for yourself, for others, and by doing so, you'll have an opportunity to submit questions and to join us in this interview. I mentioned this earlier. The timing of this book is really unbelievable. Even just this weekend with the FISA memo coming out and it being released. Talk about that a little bit and how it relates.
The publisher that I chose, which is HarperCollins, and their imprint Broadside Books, when we first started talking about it, they said, well, we're thinking of sometime in 2019. And I said, no. If we're going to do it, it has to get out by June, July of this year, 2018. Because this story is happening now. It is current. It's going to go on for a while. But we have enough information, enough evidence, enough facts, and I certainly know the law, to be able to put together a strong and compelling case of what I think happened. And the title, frankly, tells you what happened, that there was a scheme, an illicit one. Top government officials at the FBI and the Department of Justice didn't want Donald Trump to be president. Their biggest problem was, what do we do about Hillary Clinton and the crimes she committed? One of the interesting things I found out is that James Comey, after more than a year of investigation, had found that she committed crimes. He wrote it down not once but twice. The statute is called gross negligence in the mishandling of classified documents. Comey wrote it down in a memo that he authored. And then he showed it to his staff and he said, but I want to clear her anyway. And the staff quickly realized that, well, Mr. Comey, you wrote that she broke the law. You can't clear her. So we got to do something about that. So they schemed to rewrite his memo, which analyzed what Hillary Clinton had done. And on June 6th of 2016, Peter Strzok, FBI agent in charge of the investigation, sits down at his computer at FBI headquarters, and over his shoulder is his paramour, with whom he's having an extramarital affair. Her name is Lisa Page. And they get rid of those vexing words, gross negligence, that have a distinct legal meaning. They're right out of the statute, felony statute. And they substitute the term extremely careless, which, by the way, in the law is synonymous with gross negligence. They're indistinguishable terms, but they sound different. And they created the appearance that she didn't break the law when in fact she did. Where did they get that word careless, by the way? Well, about 6 weeks earlier, they got it from Barack Obama, the president, when he was interviewed on Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace. He said, well, Hillary Clinton didn't intend to break the law, she was just careless. I surmise that they're sitting at Strzok's computer and somebody pops off and says, because there were 2 other people in the room, one of whom was a lawyer, and they said, why don't we just use Barack Obama's terminology because it sounds better than gross negligence, which is a crime. And sure enough, that's what they did. Now, I'm surmising that took place, that conversation of let's use Barack Obama. I don't know that it did, but I find it curious that when they sat at that computer on that date and changed the language, they used the word careless that Obama had used. Nobody, by the way, has ever accused Obama of obstruction of justice in that case. But people, of course, are frequently accusing Donald Trump of obstruction for doing things that are not under the law of obstruction of justice. So,
Now you can submit questions, and so let's go to our first question here. Just for those of you just joining us, you can go to premiercollectibles.com/Gregg, and you can purchase a signed copy of a book there, and then submit a question, which we'll start to work our way through here over the next 30 minutes or so. So let's go to our first question. Richard in Houston, Texas asks, how do we fix the two-level justice system? I do this and go to jail forever, and yet none of these folks are doing time.
You know, actually, I think it's a three-tiered system of justice. One for Hillary Clinton, in which she can do anything and get away with it. Another for Donald Trump, when he so much as sneezes or coughs, it's an impeachable offense or a high crime and misdemeanor, or obstruction or something, just, pick your poison. And then a third for all the rest of us. We must adhere to the law, and if we don't, we can be charged, and often are, prosecuted and convicted. So there's an inherent unfairness here, and the reason it's unfair is that because people in positions of power abuse their positions of power. They allow their political partisanship or their personal animus to influence their decision making. When I was practicing law, prosecutors on the other side of the table, I was a defense attorney, they had enormous latitude and discretion to decide to prosecute or not decide to prosecute. And we're now seeing this on steroids at the FBI and the Department of Justice, that if people there don't like your politics, they'll come after you. And I just said on Hannity's program on television a short time ago, we've gotten to the point, sadly, tragically, where Americans should be afraid of their own government. This is a story in the Russian hoax of corruption at the highest levels of government. People, and I think you'll reach this conclusion if you read the book, people subverted the rule of law, and they attempted to undermine democracy and undo a presidential election. To put it in a nutshell, James Comey thought he was smarter than American voters. And he wanted Hillary Clinton to be president and Donald Trump not to be. And he manipulated the system and exploited his power to achieve that result. And the result was the Russia hoax.
Derek, who logged on and bought a book here for his girlfriend Mela. Derek from California asked, do you believe that Comey and Mueller were the insurance policy that is protecting the deep state with Rosenstein?
Yeah, in a way, I think that's, Derek, a good question, and it's a pivotal question. I think the insurance policy that you're referring to in the Peter Strzok text was this probe, this criminal investigation or counterintelligence investigation of Donald Trump. And the goal and design was we can use it and leak it to the media, and that will damage Trump's chances at getting elected in November of 2016. Failing that, we can continue the investigation, undo the election, and drive him from office amid accusations that were, in truth, completely unfounded. It was a frame job, a con job, one of the great hoaxes and scams in modern American history. And the people behind it were indeed, initially, James Comey with the help of Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and Andrew McCabe. But then, once Comey was fired, he steals government documents, leaks them to a friend for the purpose of leaking them to the media, in particular the New York Times, which immediately Comey intended would trigger the appointment of a special counsel who just happens to be his longtime friend, partner, and ally, Robert Mueller. So yeah, I mean, in many ways, they are the engineers and instigators of the great Russia hoax.
And again, folks, you can, for those of you just joining us, and I know some of you are are jumping in here, you can purchase a book, a signed copy at premiercollectibles.com/Gregg. You'll have an opportunity to submit questions, which we're going to work our way through here today. Gregg signing books, as you can see, and buy one for yourself, for a family member, for a friend. We are thankful that you're here and with us today. So let's go back. There was some, there's always all this talk about collusion. And,
Yes.
And talk to us a little bit. I mean, is there any real evidence of collusion between Trump and the Russians?
None whatsoever. And that's part of the hoax, the Russia hoax. Let's begin with the word collusion. It's only a crime in antitrust law, and thus the negative connotation associated with it. There is no other federal criminal statute in which collusion is a crime. Now, when I first wrote a column saying collusion is not a crime in a political campaign, people jumped all over me in the media, and they, fact-checking organizations turned to obscure professors I've never heard of who said, well, but there might be other crimes sort of related to collusion. And then one of them I remember was honest services fraud. Well, anybody can look that up, and it has no application whatsoever. Another one was the Federal Campaign Election Act. Well, foreign nationals are allowed to participate in American campaigns. It says so straight out of the Act's website. Another one was 371 of the United States Code about defrauding the government. The problem with that is the Supreme Court has said that involves, trickery and dishonesty and craft. And I'll give you an example. Having a meeting at the Trump Tower between the president's son and a Russian lawyer who wants to convey information for the campaign doesn't involve, on its face, trickery, craft, or dishonesty. Let's assume that the Russian lawyer had some information about Hillary Clinton, gives it to the Trump campaign, they use it in the campaign. There's no trickery or craft or deceit or dishonesty there. So that statute really doesn't apply either. Look, I'm not the Lone Ranger who thinks that collusion is not a crime in a political campaign. Professor Emeritus at Harvard, Alan Dershowitz, who did a book signing 2 weeks ago here with you.
Absolutely.
He's got a book out, The Case Against Impeaching Trump, has repeatedly said, show me in the criminal code where collusion is a crime in a political campaign. It ain't there. A guy I respect a lot, Jonathan Turley, a professor at George Washington University, has said much the same thing repeatedly. Collusion's not a crime. So, here we are 2 years into an investigation, a year of the FBI, a year of the special counsel investigation. And as Trey Gowdy said a few days ago on television on a Sunday program, he said, I've had more access as chairman of the Oversight Committee to top secret and classified documents than anybody. I've read them all. I have yet to see a scintilla of evidence of collusion. And then he went on to say, and if there was any evidence of collusion, you can bet that Adam Schiff, the minority member, a Democrat on the Intelligence Committee, would have leaked it to the media, since he seems to be pretty good at that leaking business. So I think it's fair to say that if there was any evidence of collusion, we'd know it by now, and it seems apparent from the moves of the special counsel that they've given up on that. They've shifted their attention to obstruction of justice, which is another canard that doesn't apply to the president's actions.
Let's take a question from our viewers here. And again, if you're just joining us, you can go to premiercollectibles.com/Gregg. You can buy a book and have access to send us in questions. We'll take as many as we can here. So David in Maryland starts out with quite a compliment here. He says, Gregg, your truth and logic and ability to speak so precisely and clearly is a godsend to cable news in any debate in which you are involved.
David.
Your kind words.
You're my new best friend, David, in Maryland. I lived in Maryland for 2 years in Salisbury, Maryland. It was my first full-time job in television for the ABC affiliated station there. And, you know, I have fond memories of Ocean City, Maryland, and all over the Eastern Shore, and crabbing in the Chesapeake, and you know, I love Maryland. But go ahead. So
yeah, well, so no, he goes on to say, if you speak, I listen and believe. So then he asks,
thank you.
How can we call ourselves a country of laws and justice for all if Hillary Clinton and the likes of James Comey, Loretta Lynch, and the rest of the FBI, DOJ are not brought to justice for their numerous crimes?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? How can we call ourselves a country? It's the best country in the world. It's the best system of government in the world, but it is not a perfect system. Democracy only works if the people who are elected and appointed to positions to dispense democracy in America are not corrupted. And you know, it's the age-old saying, Lord Byron, I think, famously said it, that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And what I've seen in my 63 years, and I've been a lawyer for almost 40 years and doing television for, I don't know, about 35 years, is that the higher the level of power, the greater the temptation to abuse that power for your own personal ends, whether it be political or to advance your own career. And it's one of the great conundrums of a democracy. How do you guard against that? We have all kinds of checks and balances in America. I write about this in the book. But, you know, it cannot eliminate human frailties of, you know, greed and personal advancement and anger and hatred. All of those things come to influence people's decision in high levels of government. You know, I think this is a sad and tragic case of, you know, people in position of power who were determined to stop Trump. And I'll give you two examples. The now famous text by Peter Strzok to his lover, Lisa Page. She asks, you know, is Trump going to become president? And he said, we're going to stop him. That wasn't the only time that somebody involved in all of this said we're going to stop Trump. The author of the dossier, which was totally phony and fabricated, an ex-British spy, MI6, although when you're MI6, I don't think you're ever ex-MI6, Christopher Steele, in September of 2016, as he's handing over more memos in the dossier, tells Bruce Orr of the Department of Justice that he's, quote unquote, desperate to stop Trump. Now, the FBI knew that. They knew those words came from the guy who authored this fabricated anti-Trump dossier, and yet the FBI and the DOJ used that document to gain a FISA warrant to spy on the Trump campaign, and specifically Carter Page. You know, I think it's very, very hard to make sense of how people can convince themselves that what it is they're doing is right and just when they're so flagrantly violating the rule of law. It's confounding to me. Good question.
And thank you again, David, for joining us and asking that question. Again, we're here. Gregg is signing copies of his book, newly released here in stores, and you can order it online. If you want to get a signed copy, though, right here, we're signing books. Gregg signing books. You can go to premiercollectibles.com/Gregg. You can order copies of the signed book and then submit questions. So let's keep going through some of these questions here. We actually got a question from Ontario, so we have some international viewers here, so this is exciting. Thomas asks, is there any evidence to suggest possibility that the FISA judges court were complicit with the top Obama FBI and DOJ in the conspiracy to frame Donald Trump?
Yeah, I don't think they were complicit knowingly and willingly, consciously. I think that they were duped. But at the same time, I don't think that they scrutinized the documents and questioned the officials who submitted them sufficiently enough. As I have seen the FISA warrant applications, and now this last weekend we saw more of them, but we saw some of them in February of this year, thanks to the House Intelligence Committee. There are red flags all over that. And were I sitting on a high bench in a black robe on a secret court, I would be especially vigilant because it's a secret court. It's not open to the public. There's no defense on the other side. You've just got prosecutors who are often overzealous. And that FISA court is a rotating group of judges. They have to trust the people who are in front of them and the documents they're submitting. And I think I would have, for example, looked at footnote number 8 in the FISA warrant application that cryptically alludes to who was paying for this dossier that was the bulk of the FISA application. And I would have started asking questions. It doesn't say Hillary Clinton. Now we know it was Hillary Clinton. Christopher Steele was on the Clinton bankroll. And I would have said, wait a minute, who is source number 1 exactly? And what is this group that's sort of nebulously identified as having commissioned this document? And I would have demanded answers before I, affixed my signature. Now, hindsight's 20/20, and it's, I suppose it's easy for me to look and say, these should have been glaring red flags. But when you're a judge and it's a secret court and there's nobody on the other side, I think you have to be really discerning. And look, my background as a defense attorney, there are very few prosecutors I trust. Maybe we need more defense attorneys on the FISA court as judges. But there were red flags all over this. One of the great deceptions is that, Comey goes in front of the FISA court and he lays out this story about Carter Page being a foreign agent for the Russians. The truth is that he was never a foreign agent for the Russians, and the FBI knew that. How did they know that? Because Carter Page in 2013 through 2015 helped the Department of Justice prosecute Russians who were foreign agents. That's if questions had properly been asked by the judges, I think they would have uncovered the scam, the scheme, that this was a completely fraudulent document. If any of you want to take the time to read the FISA document, it's 17 different memos. You can get it online. And if you are looking for a good laugh, read the dossier. I've read it 100 times. I laugh every single time. It's like a really bad first-time detective fiction novel writer in high school. I mean, it's a joke on its face. One of the things it says is this collusion scheme to influence the election has been going on between Trump and Putin for 5 to 8 years. Donald Trump didn't know that he was going to be running for president 5 to 8 years before 2016. So that's preposterous. And also when you read it, it's a guy told a guy who told another guy that Trump was colluding with Russia. Well, that's quadruple hearsay. And the guys are all anonymous. There are some names in there, but they are not the direct sources. So if you try to present the document itself in any court in America, the judge would have said, this is quadruple hearsay, get out of my courtroom and never come back. And yet this is what they presented to the FISA court.
For those of you just joining us, we are here. Gregg is signing books, and you can actually purchase signed copies by going to premiercollectibles.com/Gregg, and you'll have an opportunity to submit questions as well. Gregg, let me ask you, Brian here from South Dakota writes in, and by the way, Brian, thank you for buying a book.
Thanks, Brian.
Brian asked, what safeguards can be set in place to avoid potential of anything like this ever occurring again?
Well, I think I wouldn't call it a safeguard, but I'd call it a remedy, is to clean house. There's a reason why Americans identified with Donald Trump's invidious term, the swamp, because it really is a cesspool of corruption in Washington, D.C. And he dared to promise that he was going to drain the swamp. Well, the swamp didn't want to be drained. And they have been fighting him tooth and nail ever since the day he was elected. And part of the swamp is, James Comey and Robert Mueller and, McCabe and Strzok. Have these people ever been outside of Washington, D.C. and held a real job, a job outside of government? They're all career people. And while there are a great many, career government employees in America, some people, and Congress is the worst of them, some people, this is their life, and they're addicted to power like, crack addicts. And they'll do anything to perpetuate their own power. And I think these people felt that Donald Trump was a threat to their own power. And they were going to prevent him from getting elected and bring about his demise upon his election. So, one of the remedies would be to drain the swamp, as the president said. And, I would begin with the FBI. I'd probably fire every top official at the FBI, including, Christopher Wray, Comey's replacement. He has done nothing except defy lawful congressional subpoenas since he arrived at the FBI. He has stonewalled and obstructed and attempted to cover up, in my judgment. So I'd begin with Christopher Wray, and I'd get rid of the whole top level of the FBI, the hardworking men and women of the FBI out in the field offices. And these are the people who are the real heroes of the FBI. James Comey is no hero. He is a villain of the worst kind.
One more, Patricia, and again, we'll just, we continue to take questions and comments online here. Patricia from Connecticut says, I do not have a question, but I want you to know how much I enjoy watching you on Fox News.
Oh, thank you. That's very nice of you. I appreciate it. Keep watching if you would. I'd appreciate that. That's always great. And hope you enjoy the book. It's been getting some pretty good reviews on Amazon, but it's early still. It just was available in bookstores today and was shipped out by Amazon for arrival today, I think.
And am I correct in saying the president tweeted earlier about
He did
about the book?
He very kindly issued a tweet about an hour and a half ago. I don't have it in front of me, but he. I know that he has read several chapters of the book, and because he told me he did, and. He seemed to like it, and his tweet endorsed it. And so, for those of you who like Donald Trump, I'm happy to have the endorsement, certainly.
Absolutely. We're going to do something a little different here. We do this at all of our live signings, and actually during this time, Alan Dershowitz at the last signing began singing, so we'll see how this goes. But yeah. But this is called 22 Questions, and what we do is in 2 minutes we're going to ask 22 questions just to get to know you, the author, a little better.
Right.
And so, your quick answers, and this is just an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better.
I did star in Guys and Dolls in high school, by the way. I was Sky Master.
Oh, there we go. Okay,
yes.
So maybe we can go ahead and mark this to 21 questions.
It was written of me that I had the best singing voice in decades, but of course my mother wrote that for the newspaper, but that's a whole nother story. This is Fred Water Oh, recyclable, refillable and recyclable.
There we
Good.
go.
All
Thank you, Fred. All right, so we're going to jump right in here, and let's get started. So where were you born?
Los Angeles, California.
Los Angeles, California. Who would you want to play you in a movie?
Oh, Pee Wee Herman would probably be the best. You know, it's the closest to the way I look and behave. Kidding, JK, as my daughters would say.
JK, all right. What was your first job?
Well, I signed up with the YMCA when I was like 8 or 9 years old to mow lawns and, you know, pick weeds and stuff like that. But my first, you know, real job was as a box boy and bag boy at the Huntington Market in San Marino. And, you know, you stock the store shelves, you know, you fill up boxes and bags for customers.
What is your biggest fear?
Well, I have this continuing nightmare that I am late for a math exam and I forgot to attend class all semester and I can't even open my locker because I can't remember the combination. Every time that's my biggest fear. I have like, you know, I wake up in a cold sweat.
I have a very similar dream.
It's a math dream. Everybody has math. They're math nightmares.
Math nightmares. Who makes you laugh the most?
Who makes me laugh? Well, the dossier makes me laugh every time, as I mentioned before. Who makes me laugh the most? You know, the late Robin Williams. He cracked me up every time. Just looking at Robin Williams, he had these great faces. And, you know, we all miss him. He was one of the all-time great comedians.
What is one thing you need to have in your refrigerator at all times?
Ice.
Ice.
No, and not the kind of ice you're thinking of, like ice cubes. Ice, soft drinks. I'm like addicted to they're like 0 calorie. They come in all these great flavors that I love, like black raspberry and pineapple, coconut and lime, and they're 0 calories. They come in these tall bottles. I have to have it at all times.
There you go. Who's the most interesting person you met recently?
The most interesting person I met recently. I don't know. I've met so many interesting people. I will tell you that the most interesting book I have read by a guy who I think is probably the most interesting person I'd like to meet is Ron Chernow, who wrote several great books. I just finished reading 2 of them. They're very long, like 1,000 pages each. But he came out, his most recent book is Ulysses S. Grant, and I just finished his other book on George Washington. I think he would be a fascinating guy to talk to. I hope to meet him someday.
What is your favorite hobby?
Well, I paint landscapes, acrylic on canvas.
Oh, wow. And then we'll have this be our last question, but what is the last movie you saw in theaters?
I walked out of it. My wife, I think it was The Incredibles. Is that like an animation thing?
Yeah.
And my wife, and I didn't realize, this is like, I guess I don't know what's going on in the world. I had no idea it was like an animation thing. And we're like 20 minutes, half hour into it. And I was like, okay, I'm out of here. You can come with me or I'll just walk home. And so
that was that?
Yeah, that was that.
Well, Greg, we got a couple more minutes here. And again, for those of you who are tuning in late here and just joining us, you can buy copies, signed copies, as you can see Greg is signing books. Signed copies of the book, The Russia Hoax, The Illicit Scheme to Clear Hillary Clinton and Frame Donald Trump. You can purchase books at premiercollectibles.com/Greg. Greg, in our final minutes here, and we got 3 or 4 minutes left, talk to our listeners and those watching. Why is it important for the American people to read your book now?
Well, because I think this is the biggest scandal in a century. I lived through Watergate. I was in my senior year of high school and then college through Watergate, and I was actually went to work on Capitol Hill thereafter, and Watergate was really a painful national nightmare, to borrow Jerry Ford's words. But you know, I think this is 10 times worse. You know, Watergate was, you know, Nixon and a bunch of burglars trying to wiretap the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate, you know, complex, and then a stupid, silly cover-up. This is about trifling with our democracy and the rule of law, and seeking to influence an election by clearing a candidate who had committed crimes and trying to frame her opponent for crimes he didn't commit. When you mess with our elections, and I mean, that's the foundation of American democracy. And it is, as I say at the very beginning, an insidious abuse of power. In fact, I began the book by quoting the great Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis. Let me pull out the quote here. The greatest dangers to liberty lurk in insidious encroachment by men of zeal. And that's what happened here. Men of zeal engaged in an insidious abuse of power, and we must all be on guard that it doesn't happen again. And one of the best ways to do it is to understand what happened. You know, I lay out the facts, the evidence, the law. It's all meticulously sourced in 700 footnotes, and I think by the time you finish this book, you will reach the conclusion that these people badly damaged democracy, and it may take decades for America to recover.
We'll take one more quick question here from our viewers online. Bill in Ohio, and this is interesting. He asked, where does this investigation go from here? So I guess looking into the future, where do you see this kind of, how do you see this unfolding?
You know, I don't know, because I don't trust the government to do the right thing. And that's another sort of sad commentary on where we are. The Department of Justice currently is a sham and a charade. I hate to say it, but Jeff Sessions, who is personally a nice man, is completely feckless and incompetent. I think they have him parked somewhere in a back room playing with his Legos. And the person who's really operating the Department of Justice, the real Attorney General, is the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, who has proven time and again that he is not to be trusted to do the right thing. He has been obstructing justice, in my view. Should have recused him from overseeing the special counsel. Should never have appointed the special counsel. He is riven with conflicts of interest. And a guy like that should be nowhere near the Justice Department building in Washington, D.C. So with people like that in charge, God help us.
Greg, this has been an absolute honor. And you're gonna keep signing books, but I think our live feed here is coming to an end. So we will we'll close this down, but you can continue to buy books at premiercollectibles.com/Greg. Any final words here for our listeners, our viewers?
You know, I've never written a book before, and I'll probably never write another one again, because I wrote every word of this, and it was quite grueling and painful. I wrote 7 hours a day, 7 days a week, for basically 5 months. But I'm proud of the book. I think it exposes corruption at the highest level. And if some good can come out of the information here, if this opens the eyes of Americans to what their government is doing behind their backs, then I think I will have accomplished something worthwhile. So I hope you read it, please. And thanks for joining us tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Gregg, and to all our viewers, thank you for being with us again. Purchase copies of the book, signed copies, and thank you again for your time tonight.
Thanks.